Hello and welcome back. In the last episode of this series, talked about how dub came into being, and in the next couple of episodes, I'll be talking about two of the most important characters. Let's pick up where we left off. Many producers and engineers worked in different studios, and no individual can really be called the inventor of dub music. However, two men would become synonymous with that word, and they both honed their craft at Duke Reid's Treasure Island Studios. They were Lee Perry and King Tubby. It's difficult to imagine two men with such different personalities. In truth, they were just two characters in a constantly rotating cast of players. Kingston was full of session musicians, engineers, producers. There were horn sections like the Scartalites who made their own records and added horn arrangements for many hits of the day. There were keyboard players. There was of course everybody's favourite melodica player, Augustus Pablo. There were percussionists, guitar players, drummers, and probably most important to the genre, bass players. Getting all these musicians to work together and make magic was Lee Perry's speciality. He was, by nature, an amplified personality, full of enthusiasm. His story starts as far away from Kingston as you can get and still be in Jamaica. He was born Rainford Hugh Perry in the northwestern province of Hanover in 1936. His parents were day labourers in farming. His dad became a professional dancer later in his childhood. Rhythm was in the family. And from his mother, he learnt about West African Yoruban traditions. So that pulse of the drum was in unison with his heart from a young age. He left school at 15, drifted a little, played lots of dominoes and built up a spiritual relationship with rocks and stone, herbs and music. He was a small youth with a big personality in a small town, so he moved to Kingston. He got his start in the music industry selling records for Coxsone Dodd's sound system. He was just one of many small cogs in the enormous Jamaican music machine. Coxsone owned the Studio One label, and Perry apprenticed there. Over time, he took on more and more roles in the studio. Engineer, musician, arranger, featured artist. His breakthrough hit, People Funny Boy, sold 60,000 copies on the island. He might have been funny, but he was no boy. Perry was 32 in 1968 when it came out. The record had what would become one of his trademarks, a crazy sample. This time it was the sound of a baby crying. Later Perry records would feature the likes of doors creaking, cows mooing, chainsaws, just about anything really. Now, around the same time as People Funny Boy, an instrumental of his project The Upsetters, Son of Django, hit number 6 in the UK chart. So Perry was an established hitmaker, and so he was afforded creative space. He had a few alter egos. There was Scratch, there was The Upsetter, and my personal favourite, Pipecock Jackson. Now, as a producer, he was engaged in the project of stripping down Jamaican music and creating space, along with the rest of the innovators of dub. He filled up that space with sounds that were as out there as any psychedelia. There were sound effects, tape echoes, phasing, and the riffs themselves were informed by rhythm and blues, US rhythm and blues, soul and funk. You can find borrowed soul riffs right the way through Perry's discography, but always with that chunky stress on the offbeat. And he borrowed from other parts of American culture as well. Son of Django borrows from the cowboy iconography that was popular in Jamaica in the 1960s. If you don't know his work, the standard place to start is the Arkology compilation. It's great and captures a lot of the most famous tracks from his classic period, but I think there's a better place. Start with Blackboard Jungle Dub. It's something special. Now, he's totally irrelevant to this story, but here's what Keith Richards had to say about Lee Perry. He was more than a producer. He knows how to inspire the artist's soul. Like Phil Spector, he's got the gift of not only hearing sounds that come from nowhere else, but also translating those sounds to the musicians. Scratch is a shaman, and he certainly played up to that role. Now, how much Perry's persona was performance, we'll never know. He was, as I called him earlier, the jester of dub, a Jamaican Loki making mischief. The legend is that he was basically a madman. He blew smoke into microphones and burnt down his studio to rid it of evil spirits. In truth, he probably had some kind of manic disorder. No shade though. He put that energy into an extreme amount of creativity. For a start, between 1969 and 1970, Perry recorded no less than 6 albums for his Obsessors project. He put out stuff on multiple labels. He made money. Also, he lived to a pretty good age with his wife and 2 children in Switzerland, so maybe not quite as crazy as the legend says. It could be, just perhaps, that all this I am madman stuff was just an act. In truth, we'll never know. The labels on his 45s read produced and directed by Lee Perry, and that was about right. Working in lots of other studios led to Perry deciding to set up his own, and it had a vibe. Black Ark was filled with instruments and musicians, hangers-on and lots of smoke. It had the classic layout of a Jamaican studio, makeshift and ramshackle equipment in an outhouse, wires and plugs everywhere. Only Scratch really knew what was going on. Again, not as crazy as he seemed. He produced other artists, as well as made lots of his own records. He recorded The Wailers for a start. For Max Romeo, he produced the classic pair of albums Revelation Time and War in a Babylon. These 2 albums in particular came out just as Jamaica was going through its catastrophic upheaval and violence. Junior Mervin's Police and Thieves, which I mentioned in the last episode, or the episode before that, is another document of this turmoil. Perry was trying to do business in times which were complete chaos, and I personally think it took a toll on his mental health. He was obsessive about his work. He took 3 years, for example, to complete work on the Congos' now classic album, Heart of the Congos. In that time, he had a dispute with Chris Blackwell of Island Records and released it himself in tiny quantities only on the island of Jamaica. So Perry had a lot of things on his plate. He had a superhuman weed intake and chaos outside the door. Things weren't great in Britain at that time. It was a grim time, and as we know, that gave rise to punk. But they were far worse in Jamaica. The economy had crashed. All the grand plans of the government had failed. Minerals had been replaced by ganja as the main export. And since Jamaica no longer accepted dollars into the economy, it was being paid for with more guns. The political parties sponsored criminal gangs and militias. As I said before, but it bears repeating, 200 people died in the run-up to the general election. That spring reverb was sounding ever more like gunfire every day. Bob Marley found himself dragged into things. Both political parties had tried to get his endorsement, and even making moves towards Michael Manley earned him 2 gunshot wounds. His wife Rita was also shot in the head, along with 2 band associates. Now, thankfully, no one was killed, but this was an attempted assassination. The question is, who ordered it? Now, there's enough evidence that it was the CIA that it's all over the Wikipedia page for this matter. But I'm saying nothing. What is true is that Jamaica was at war. The titles of tracks speak for themselves. Perry did a dub mix for Jar Lion using the Police and Thieves rhythm track entitled Soldier and Police War. But at the same time as there was a political message to the music, it was highly experimental. The Upsetters' Super Ape records were a bit of a cult hit in the UK. They were released by Virgin Records, Breadhead Hippie, Richard Branson to cash in on the stoner demographic. The prize for first dub album to be issued in the UK though goes to Keith Hudson's Pick a Dub, which was made with no small input from King Tubby. Okay, so stay tuned, like, subscribe, all that business, and coming up in a few days, the story of Osborne Ruddock, King Tubby. Bye.